Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. I'm your host, Roman Zelichenko, former immigration attorney turned entrepreneur. I'm the founder of Laborless, an immigration tech company that automates H-1B visa compliance, and also the founder of GMI Rocket, which is a digital marketing agency for the immigration and mobility space, and of course, which brings you this show. So today on episode 130, we have eimmigration by Cerenade, which I'm super excited about. We have our guest, Phillip Yadidian, who is the founder and CEO of Cerenade, which is now eimmigration by Cerenade, and Joel Yadidian, who is the general manager of eimmigration by Cerenade, and also who happens to be Phillip's son, which is really awesome. Of course, we always love to see a family business in the immigration space. So I'm really excited to talk to them about the growth of the business, how the company changed from the beginning stages when actually it didn't even initially launch as an immigration product, but rather as just a software product in the mid to late 90s, how it evolved over time and how it became one of the biggest immigration case management platforms in the world, frankly, which is really exciting. So before we get started with the team, I do want to say a quick thank you to the main sponsor of this episode, which is DocketWise. So DocketWise is an all-in-one case management platform with best-in-class immigration forms, super customizable questionnaires, industry-leading integrations, including with Laborless, my company, great customer service. They create a lot of content for the industry. So, they create blogs, ebooks, a podcast, which I've been on as well, and more. They support the show. And so I'm really grateful to DocketWise for being a supporter of the show for so many episodes. And please check them out at www.docketwise.com or check out the link in the show notes. So with that, Phillip and Joel, thank you guys so much for being here. And I'm really excited to, dive into your story and really hear about, how Cerenade continues to be a dominant force in the immigration tech industry.
Hi, Roman. It's a pleasure to be here.
Excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you both. So, typically when I have co-founders or multiple people on the show, I usually kind of go with one person first and then, kind of move on to the second person. So, Joel, if it's okay with you, I'll start with the senior Yadidian here and, dive into the background. And so then we'll bring you in to hear how, you start to fit into the story and your background as well. So Phillip, you were born in Iran. You came to the U.S. as an immigrant. And so we'll get to how you started the business and all that, but I really love to dive into the story, right, of the actual individual, how they were raised, how they their schooling and all that, because I think it all actually matters. I think all of these dots, when you start looking backwards, do end up connecting to what, especially entrepreneurs and founders end up doing. So could you talk a little bit about, you were born in Iran pre-revolution. You came here in the late 70s, right, as that kind of revolution was happening. But, and I'd love to hear stories about Iran, pre-revolution. What do you remember, I guess, from, maybe childhood days or something, or growing up, going to school there? Like, what do you remember about what was happening in Iran and maybe around business and things like that?
Sure. It was a long time ago, but the first 16 years of my life was spent in Iran. Life was more or less same as here at this during the pre-revolution era. You get up, get ready, go to school. You really don't see anything different from here. Of course, we didn't have the Islamic Republic yet, so the way people would dress or act or whatever was not that different from here. I always wanted to eventually come to United States, at least initially, just to go to school. But of course, the way things turned out with the revolution, when I came, I stayed and never went back.
So can you talk a little bit about, so the first 16 years of your life, obviously, and those things were very different. Were you a studious child? Were you kind of always thinking about, I know you said you wanted to eventually end up in the US. Were you thinking, career path, let me study something and get a job? Or were you kind of more maybe business minded, maybe buying and selling things? I always am curious how people are, who eventually start businesses when they're kids, basically.
No, I was very studious and actually very competitive. I had to be number one in the class. Actually, they rated people in Iran in our classes at the end of the year. So it would be a big deal if you're in the number one spot. So the focus was studying, but I also had a social life. So a mix of both, really.
Mm-hmm. Did you have any, business people in your family at all? Parents, uncles, I mean, anybody around you that?
My father was a business person. Actually, he came to United States in, I'm gonna say, late 40s to complete his studies for university. He actually lived in New York. He went to Long Island University then, and his major was marketing and merchandising. And when he came back to Iran, he was a businessman. He had interestingly enough, an advertising company, uh, and also a motion picture company.
Wow. That's, yeah, I mean, film and arts in Iran, I mean, still continues actually to flourish. It's one of those things that people don't realize, I mean, we hear what we hear about Iran on the news, especially kind of in America and in the quote unquote West, but there's still so much incredible art that comes out of Iran. I've seen shows by Iranian artists here. Films continue to come out to critical acclaim. It's amazing that your family was in that business as well. So you growing up, you were studying a lot, very competitive. You had some business around you, but I guess the idea was you have to do well in school. That will lead to a good career, good life, et cetera, especially in America. Now, did your family know you wanted to go to America, or is this something that you kind of
Yes.
kept? Yeah.
Yes, I would ask them, and my father would tell me, okay, why don't you finish your first, you finish your 12th grade, and then we'll talk.
Okay.
Luckily, a revolution happened, schools were closed, and I used that as an opportunity. Actually, I did pretty much all of this stuff myself. I, translated my grades. I went to the U.S. Embassy, got my visa. I contacted somebody in the U.S. to get I-20, and they were pretty much confronted with a sort of a done deal. The schools are closed. Nothing is happening. So they were sort of forced to let me come to U.S.
So, and you said your father studied here, so it's not like your family said no, please don't go. Because I've had guests come here who ended up studying here, and they basically came here against their family's will. Obviously, they ended up staying and being successful, but I guess the relationship was good between the countries then, and it made sense to come here. So you show up here as a student. Was that an F1 visa that you came in, or some equivalent of it?
Yes,
then?
F1.
And you came to study, I guess, at university.
Actually, I finished the last 2 years of high school in the U.S.
Okay.
In '79, when I came, I was in the middle of 11th grade, and I went to boarding school then. And then for the 12th grade, we moved to Los Angeles. I finished my high school in the Catholic school, interestingly enough. So, and then I went to UCLA with major of math and computer science.
So what was, first of all, when you came here, did you come by yourself or did you come with family members, or did you have family members here who you kind of connected with?
I came with my cousin who was my age, and we were also classmates. So we were roommates in the boarding school.
Yeah.
And then, so from January of '79, which is when I moved to US, through June, we were together. And then the summer of '79, my parents and my siblings also came to U.S. My mom and my siblings stayed, and my dad had to go back to, prepare stuff for
Mhm.
his eventual moving to United States as well.
So yeah, because I just thinking when it's hard to, especially if you're 16, 17 years old, across the country and be without family. But it's nice that you had some, at least your cousin initially, and then your rest of your family kind of joined. So you moved to LA, you studied computer science. What did it mean to study computer science? I mean, mathematics, I understand. What did it mean to study computer science in kind of the late 70s, early 80s? What were you guys working on? What was being talked about in school then?
Computer science is computer science. Things haven't changed. I can tell you this. When we were going to college, there were no personal computers.
Mhm.
So we had to sign up on a sheet to get time to go work on a mainframe maybe an hour a week. And the rest of the time, we had to actually hand code and hand trace everything. So in that sense, things were different, but they computer science in and of itself fundamentally hasn't changed. Of course, a lot of areas have grown nowadays of obviously artificial intelligence, but same.
Hmm. Interesting. And I guess you were watching the kind of PC revolution also happen in real time, kind of late 80s, et cetera, and then into the 90s, of course. Um, so okay, you finished, you studied computer science, and you graduated. Now, before we get to when you eventually started your own business, I just like to talk a little bit about what were some of the jobs, like where were you working, what were you working on, that eventually led you to start your own
So
company.
while I was going to school to UCLA, I also worked part time as a junior programmer. And that actually prepared me for the marketplace when I graduated. So that was a good experience for me. And when I graduated, I really didn't have a hard time landing a good job at a reputable company, just because I had the experience.
Mm-hmm. And what were some of the? I mean, so where did you land your first job, for example?
Um, One of the things that I learned while I was working was debugging. Debugging at the university was different from debugging at a place where you have a dedicated computer and can actually use a debugger.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, at school, we had to hand debug our code, which, if you talk to anybody who works with computers nowadays, gonna think it's funny. But you don't have access to the computer resources. That's what you do. So that was one of the big things. But also, being exposed to different areas of computer science, specifically graphics, was the kind of stuff that I was exposed to when I was working part time. Just gave me a little bit of better view of the industry than somebody who just graduates from school and doesn't have the work experience.
Definitely. I mean, it to me, doing it sort of by hand on paper means you fundamentally understand it probably so much better than somebody who's only doing it on the computer. I mean, it's kind of like doing math by hand versus, I guess, using a calculator in a way, right?
Well, I can say it's a lot slower. I
That's
don't know
true.
whether that means I know it better, but yeah.
That's really interesting. So you got a job. I mean, you had some experience. What were you working for any companies, by the way, that still exist today? Like any of the big kind of more.
So when I graduated, I started working for a company called Teradyne. Teradyne is into the business of building VLSI testers and generalized testing equipment.
Mhm.
Um, So that company is still there, and actually they're doing quite well. Uh, a VLSI tester, just so you know, is the computer chips, whether it's a memory chip or a CPU, whatever, they need to be tested to make sure that they are functioning the way they're meant to before it goes to market. So that was the forte of the first company that was working for.
And so, you know, I guess because I know your LinkedIn really is focused on your business today, but you know, so you started at Teradyne, and you know, did you move on to a couple of different companies? Because this is really when I'm asking these questions, because you know, this is when I think the PC, again, the revolution was happening. Computers were exponential. I mean, maybe not exponentially yet, but they were still continuing to grow. So there must have been many companies, especially out in California. You're near Silicon Valley, where a lot of this was happening. Did you see a lot of opportunity to jump around, to try new things? Was there constantly exciting kind of computer or software, uh, you know, sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Uh, Progress, I guess, happening?
There were a lot of opportunities then. I didn't hop around too much. I worked for Teradyne maybe 6, 7 years, and then I worked for another company, Locust Computing Corporation, much smaller organization, which is not around anymore, uh, with development of AIX, which was IBM's version of Unix. And then after that, I started my own company.
It's so cool because I think we take for granted. Look, I'm an attorney. I mean, when I was a teenager, I was building websites and coding a little bit. So I was taking interest in this stuff on my own. But, I take for granted that there was so much already built, even by the time I was a teenager. And certainly today, people who start technology companies, I mean, even if you're coding, you're still plugging a lot of existing code in, and you're using, Amazon Web Services or something, and a lot of their infrastructure. I love the idea, and to think back on, how much more fundamental things were 30 years ago, right? From a software perspective, at least as far as I understand it. But nevertheless, you were working on it, and you eventually, you eventually decided to start your own business. Now, I know you didn't launch an immigration case management company from your first day, of course. So, and Joel, by the way, thank you for being so patient. We're almost, I really want to get to you. I want to get to this point beforehand first, to Philip, with you, to say, like, what was the thing that sparked this idea to start your own business? Again, in a field where, the market is growing, sure, but it isn't, how it is today, where we take for granted that computers are everywhere. So kind of what were you thinking back then, or maybe what did you see that, moved you to make that life decision?
More than anything else, for whatever reason, I didn't like to be told what to do. So that was the main impetus behind me starting my own business. So I'm going to do what I think I should be doing. In terms of the idea behind what I was going to do when I started the company, at that time, which is around late 1991, early 1992, multimedia was a big thing. Multimedia at that point was, when we just had started to have video on computers, which was a very novel, amazing thing. And ability to use multimedia to do training systems or new user interfaces that are more immersive and all that stuff, that sort of attracted me. So it was an interesting field. We started, actually, the name of the corporation, the name of the company used to be Multimedia Abacus Corporation, kind of long. But the way it evolved was, multimedia was interesting, but we couldn't get a lot of traction business-wise. So we would do demos to a lot of prospects, and they really liked it, but they didn't want to spend the money in it. So I decided to pivot, and one of the things that I was familiar with was because I was an immigrant, I went through the immigration process and all the paperwork that it requires and all that stuff. Um, I thought, well, that is probably an area that we can do a lot of automation and streamlining. And that's where the concept of doing something for the immigration space started. Um, they first technology that we started doing obviously was ability to have forms electronically. Remember, at that point there was no concept of PDF.
Mhm.
So doing an electronic forms engine was the starting point, and that was pretty much in its entirety. At least the first version of it was written by myself. And of course, we still have our own electronic forms technology, which makes us unique in the market. But that was the starting point, and building an application around it. And then again, there was no web or internet in the sense that what you have today. So initially, we did a desktop application for immigration case management system. And the name of the product, we called it EILA, EILA, which kind of sounds like EILA, by the way. But it stood for Electronic Immigration Lawyers Assistant.
Hmm.
And interestingly enough, when we started doing that, somehow a legal publisher by the name of Matthew Bender, which is now part of LexisNexis, if I'm not mistaken. They somehow found out that this is what we're doing, and they contacted us. Uh, Actually, somebody called me, and I thought one of my friends they're putting me on. Said, "Who is this? Are you kidding me?" They said, "No, no, no. We really want to come talk to you." So, we met. They liked what we were doing, and they got exclusive rights for publishing our software for a period of, I believe, 3 years. And that was sort of the starting point, establishing the market, getting ourselves known, and one thing led to another, and we're here today.
It's amazing. I love to hear that. First of all, the name changes, but also the idea that, of course, now again we take for granted that everything is cloud based, and back then desktop app you had to send them. Was it CDs or was it floppy disks at first?
Floppy disk. There were no
Yeah,
CDs then.
right. Was it the 3 by
So
5 ones or the 5 by, what is it, like 5 by 6 or 5 by 7?
no, the 3 by 5 ones, the
Three by
smaller
fives.
ones. Yeah,
Yeah, the smaller ones. So, taking for granted, if forms need updating, you have to send a new, version out. There's no,
exactly.
you don't log in, and the software updates on its own. And I think I sort of, I grew up I was born in 87. I grew up in the 90s. And so I sort of saw the transition between a PC where everything happened locally on the computer to the internet to now everything's cloud based. So it's really great to hear that. And Joel, I'm going to move to you. This is the last question that I have, but I just want to point out, or the last comment, Phillip, that I think, you started creating this with this multimedia product. And I know that's, it's definitely difficult because it sounds like it was impressive because people saw you were building something, but maybe they didn't know what the ROI would be. And so to your point, asking them to spend a lot of money at that time was very difficult for software. Do you think that what you were building at that time, which looked at, creating interfaces on the screen and things like that, did that help you sort of conceive of what this can look like for specifically the immigration space? Because you know how to build screens, you knew how to build a user interface, how to, have fields that populate something, et cetera, et cetera.
I can't say consciously.
Mm-hmm.
Probably it had some effect, but I think the world of my multimedia and the world of uh, computer user interface didn't really merge then. Maybe now more. Doing a Windows desktop app you follow basically a certain methodology, right? Your pop-ups are supposed to be looking in a certain way, and the form or the electronic rendition of the form is supposed to be looking like the form. So mm, maybe the transition between different screens and all that stuff, maybe the multimedia helped a little bit, but I can't say a lot. They were
Yeah,
like two different worlds.
that's so interesting. So Philip, thank you so much. It's so fascinating. I'm going to pause on you for a second. And Joel, I appreciate you being so patient. Maybe you heard a new story, or maybe you've heard all these stories before. So you are, Philip's son, and, proudly, this is a family business, which I love, certainly. You were born around the time the company was first being started. So really this business sort of has been part of your life, I guess, for the almost the entirety of it. You were born in the U.S., but kind of grew up in an immigrant household. Um, what was it like for you? Kind of, I don't know. What do you remember from early days? Because we'll get to your college and your career very shortly. But what do you remember early days, like having this family business sort of in the ether around you? Do you remember conversations about it? Do you remember, or was it something that just you didn't hear too much about because that was work and home is home, etc.?
It's a good question. Growing up, I was aware of the fact that my dad worked in software. I was aware of the markets that software served, including immigration. But I wasn't too in the weeds with any of these details. I mean, as a kid growing up, I, wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I think at one point I wanted to be a basketball player. I don't know if that ended up panning out. But as a kid, you're not necessarily thinking, oh, software engineering. That's what I'm into. But as I, went on to high school and did a little bit of robotics, and then college with studying computer science. And that was really, part of it was, yeah, I know my dad studied computer science, so that could be interesting, but I'm also very much a math STEMmy brain. So I'm like, okay, well, I went to school up at Berkeley in the Bay Area, and obviously there's a lot of tech around there. So I'm like, oh, this could be an interesting, application of a math brain. So that's when I started to gain a little more interest in the business, but still somewhat reserved and distant, given that I'm like, I like computer science, I like technology, but I think what I'm really interested in is the business or go-to-market side of software and tech. So it wasn't really until after college, I went on to management consulting, which is where I got some of that business and go-to-market training. And then I went on to get my MBA. And it wasn't until during my MBA where I started to ask my dad a little more. Again, I'd always ask questions here and there throughout my life, but the questions I would ask at that point in my life were a little sharper and reflective of the training I had had from consulting, from my MBA, from my experiences to that point. So that's when I started to get a little more interested. And essentially during my MBA, I was kind of doing part-time consulting for the business. And I mean, at the core of it, really, it's asking a lot of questions, right? Where given that this is a software business, the first place I was curious about was the software, the product, and I wanted to know, hey, is this why they're in a market leading position? Or is this a reason why they don't control 100% of the market? Because I see other case management softwares out there. I know you've hosted many of them on this podcast. So I just wanted to understand a little bit more, like what are the, strengths and weaknesses of the product? So that's where I was able to start bringing in some of the things I learned about from my career to that point. For instance, surveys like NPS, Net Promoter Score, and CSAT, customer satisfaction, and how to administer those and ask those in a standard way to kind of determine, to make determinations in a statistically significant fashion, and how to tie that to competitive analysis and compare features between these different competing solutions. So I was able to do all of this kind of work that I was doing for other companies previously in consulting, but for this business. And the broad takeaway from that first phase of working with Cerenade was immigration isn't just liked by its customers, it's loved. I mean, I know I'm, obviously biased here and I'm pitching my book here, but it's a genuine part of the story. I was very critical, and Philip knows how critical my mind could be. And honestly, the takeaway was this business's product is its strongest strength. You've probably heard the notion of product-led business versus a sales-led business, I assume. And typically the model that the business follows is a reflection of the founder and his or her background. And like Philip just explained, his DNA is deep software. At his core, he's an excellent CTO, and he's kind of optimized the company for product excellence. But with this strength, I then realized, then what is lagging as a result? Like what is relatively not as strong? And that's where my mind shifted from product to go-to-market, which are the kind of two pillars of most software businesses. And that's where I started to look at the different pillars of go-to-market. So I looked at sales and marketing and business development and all the technology underpinning that. And that's where the aha moment hit me of like, oh, this is it. This company, if you would go on to, search engines and you would search for e-immigration, you would see our competitors aggressively bidding on our product name and our company name. And it's not great to have, your competitor coming up as the first result because they're paying for it when someone is searching for your name. So it's not great, but it's also great because it means that clearly you're doing something right. But that's something you want to defend. So there was that. There was, not having a modern CRM in place. There were just there was a basket of low-hanging fruit to pick, and some not so low-hanging fruit, all kind of related to this theme of go-to-market. And that's where I realized I could start adding value in a way that balances Philip, where he's still our product leader and our tech leader. I'm now his counterpart on the go-to-market side, and that really got me interested. That I'm like, hey, there's a place for me here where I feel like I could meaningfully impact the picture. So a mix of that, a mix of just I'm proud of my dad and the ship that he's put together and the crew on the ship. I'm excited to be helping steer that, and further, I just like the story. I like the story of an immigrant building immigration tech. So it was at that point in kind of graduating from my MBA where I'm like, let's see what we could do with Cerenade.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I can also imagine even during law school, maybe I'm sure you had other or classmates that had family businesses or just very close to a business, but the opportunity to, test your theories out, not just in an internship where you're disconnected or purely theoretically. Like you can call your dad and say, hey, what about this? And how about that? Have you thought about these things? What have we done in this scenario? It's really awesome. I mean, you arguably had a much better MBA kind of experience because you had such close proximity to a thriving, really successful business where you can ask candid questions and get really good answers, you know?
Absolutely. It's been and continues to be unbelievable to have that, you know, privilege of exposure at this point in my career. But I have to say that there are limitations to that exposure, and that's specifically at the dinner table. If we start talking about work when I'm visiting, my mom will smack both of us and say no work talk at the dinner table. So there are still limitations to that.
Actually, hey, does your mom, is she doing anything in the business at all, or her job is to just make sure you guys remember that there's something else to do in life?
She definitely the latter. Her background, she's a dentist, so she keeps all of our teeth looking nice. But
which is marketing, by the way. That's really important for marketing.
Absolutely. I always tell. I mean, I humble brag, but I've gotten teeth compliments throughout my life, and what I always say is, of course I have to brush my teeth 80 times a day and floss all of that, because if I have bad teeth, if the dentist's son has bad teeth, what does that say about the dentist? So yes, another lesson in marketing.
That's great. I love it. That's awesome. And so, I mean, you graduated. It's great too, because you had this exposure and your whole life. It sounds like, Phillip, you didn't push Joel to do this, and sort of, Joel, you were taking a path, but it did converge in such a natural and organic way where you weren't sort of quote unquote forced into the business. I mean, which is what it sounds like, but you were rather, I mean, your curiosity led you in this direction, which just then, comes from such a different place of like, wow, I can bring this really complementary value now, and let's, it's already gone this far. Let's see how much further we can take it together. Which I love that. I love that story. Okay, so before we continue, I just want to take a very, very quick pause, just to thank the second sponsor of the show, CaseBlink. We talked a little bit about AI before, but so CaseBlink, for those who may not know, is an AI platform that's, along with many other amazing AI platforms, transforming immigration law practice. So CaseBlink was built by immigration attorneys, technologists, and AI scientists, and they started with complex writing-heavy cases like EB2, national interest waivers, EB1s, O1s, and L1s, automating the aspect of reading, organizing, assembling documents, extracting data, and sort of drafting letters and legal briefs. But since then, CaseBlink they've raised some venture capital money. They created a studio feature which enables immigration lawyers to draft things that are much more in their voice and much more in their own style. And most recently, they have rolled out forms and workflows to support, family-based immigration and humanitarian immigration cases, in addition to some of their writing-heavy employment-based. So, it's backed by leading investors and well-known immigration firms, and with an immigration lawyer co-founder. So if you're interested in learning about some of these specific AI tools in the immigration space that, go really, really well and complementary with case management platforms, check out CaseBlink. The link is in the show notes, or visit www.caseblink.com. So thank you to them for sponsoring the show. And Phillip, for me, that's a really good segue. I want to bring it back to you for a minute and ask you, we talked a little bit about how, e-immigration was launched, or EILA initially was launched as obviously a desktop app with on disks. Things progressed, right? Eventually, technology moved to the cloud, right? It became more of software as a service. I know that your company, rather, like most other companies, have all pivoted to the cloud. How has it been? I mean, you're one of the leading companies, and you're, by the way, still, haven't sold to private equity. It's still a family-run business. You call the shots, you make the decisions. It is, your team's vision. How have you managed to keep up with the changes and the development, requirements from clients? Of course, both in comparison to other products, but also looking outside the immigration space, seeing what's happening in software, and then bringing that back to immigration. How have you been able to sort of, manage that throughout the decades?
I think in the field of software, either you keep up with the new technology or you're going to become obsolete. And it's a very fast-paced type of industry. So obviously, you have to make sure that you educate yourself on an ongoing basis. You look at all the upcoming technologies, you embrace them, and even you do all that, you're still not guaranteed success. So, but the name of the game is just continue learning and continue looking at stuff.
And as somebody who, I guess, you were mathematics, computer science, you were doing this from day one. I mean, it sounds like that is of interest to you. Like it sounds like you like to continue to learn and see what's new, and then think about how it can translate into the product.
Yeah, and much like Joel mentioned, for him, my brain is more, math oriented and science oriented. So it feels more natural to me than, say, liberal arts type of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, more natural than the marketing side, maybe the sort of sales side, business development side. And look, I run Laborless. I have a legal background, but I have a background in theater and writing. Like, I definitely lean more towards the let's call it the liberal arts side of things, which is why I do the marketing and the sales. But I have to know a little bit about the product so I can talk to my CTO, who is the equivalent of you. I mean, this guy is the technical genius behind the code and everything. So it's really nice to have that balance, right? But you both have to talk to each other in each other's language a little bit. So, I'm curious as well. And by the way, everyone knows Cerenade, Immigration by Cerenade. But just to be clear, the product is forms. It's case management. It's CRM, so client relationship management. Can you guys talk a little bit about, maybe give me a quick elevator pitch? I mean, again, I'm sure everybody watching this knows or has heard of, but just in case somebody hasn't, what does immigration kind of do today, and who is the target audience for the platform?
Yeah, maybe I can tee it up,
please.
And then Philip, if you want to add in. So, like you said, Roman, we like to think of e-immigration as an operating system for the immigration legal professional, the attorney, the paralegal, the assistant, and that operating system, the core pillars of that span, like you said, case management, client management, form management, which is a particular strength of ours, given our eForms technology, which has decades of engineering behind it. And then broader practice management is that last pillar, where that kind of refers to reporting and billing and appointments and so on and so forth. So within each of those pillars, there's a variety of functionality. And I think when, and obviously I want to let our CTO give his thoughts on all of that, but when we think about our roadmap and what it is that we're building, we think of it within how to enhance each of those pillars, right? Where the tech buzzword of the year and what will be the tech buzzword of the decade is AI. We have been and are continuing to think through how to leverage AI to build either enhancements in existing functionality or new functionality across those core pillars that deliver tangible outcomes across the things that our customers care about, whether it's improving productivity or client satisfaction or collaboration or quality and compliance or cost savings. Yes, we're hyper focused on the immigration legal professional. And this is everyone from your solo practitioner to your small firm to mid-size to some very large firms that practice immigration. And it's important for us to, not just from the product side, but I told you I work on go-to-market, to think about the different offerings we have for those different segments. Again, both in terms of product functionality and in terms of, you know, marketing collateral and the go-to-market things. Philip, what would you add on to that on the product side for overview?
I think you gave a very good overview of what the product is about, and of course, as you mentioned, the artificial intelligence, which is the new buzzword nowadays, the efforts that we're undertaking, be it from translation side of things or data extraction or collaboration with other companies such as Visual AI that we use to provide technologies that they provide more specific to immigration, practice of immigration.
Philip, can you talk a little bit about that? So I've had Greg on the show, and you know, talking about VisaLaw.ai. Of course, Greg Siskin, you know, also another pioneer of technology and marketing in the space, and a very well-known immigration attorney, built a company called VisaLaw.ai. You guys have partnered. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I think that's really exciting. I mean, people, you know, they use and love VisaLaw.ai. People use and love e-immigration. What can they expect? And then maybe for folks who either don't use both or maybe don't use either of them, kind of what's the benefit of this partnership now that can bring more people value?
So
Do you want me?
yeah, you can go ahead. Sure, go, Joel.
So the reason I spoke up is I think I've been a little closer on this one than Philip has.
Okay.
He's obviously very aware of it, but I think the story of how we formed it will answer some of the questions you asked.
Okay.
So a word that we're thinking of increasingly across both product and go-to-market is the word ecosystem, where again, we think of ourselves as the operating system for immigration legal professionals. And we told you what our core pillars are within that, right? The case management, form management, practice management, client management. And again, we in many cases, your operating system can handle everything for you, depending on your needs. But as I'll say, AI makes new types of technology possible, right? Such as AI assisted drafting. That's something where, you know, we have a AI summarizer in our solution, but it's a pretty foundationally distinct offering than what you're getting from case management. And again, we want to continue offering excellent case management, but on drafting, this is where something we thought our operating system might benefit from more is if we integrate. And we did a little bit of homework. We obviously saw drafting, you know, coming up as a space within immigration. We saw a few different drafting solutions. And what I noticed was not just Visa Law, and I'm like, oh, this product looks particularly interesting. But Greg in particular, I learned a little bit more about his background, and I immediately saw this beautiful parallel to Philip of this is a industry veteran who obviously has contributed to the immigration space in a different way than Philip has, but the kind of merging of their distinct points of expertise could be really interesting, in addition to merging the actual products. But on the topic of what made sense from the product integration, it's very simple. They offer a drafting product. What is the input to making those AI generated drafts, it's information from your case management solution, right? It's client data and it's case documents. And so we're kind of, it's kind of like a sandwich where we are their inputs. They make the draft, and then that draft, the output, where does it reside? It resides in your case management system with the rest of your case and client files. So there was a very natural fit there on a product level. But what was just as interesting is the personnel and leadership compatibility. And right now we're only integrated with their drafts product, which is what I was just speaking to, but we're in the talks of discussing some I'll say some interesting new projects on the frontier.
That's awesome. Yeah, and they're, what I really like about Visa Law as well is that they have a ton of primary and then secondary, really great secondary sources. AILA textbooks. Greg is a big publisher of books, for immigration processing and such. So the fact that they feed their large language model with this information and the output is very trustworthy. And so building that into case management. So it's great. So it's like, through the integration, Cerenade eimmigration contains the information, right? You obviously pull documents and information from the applicant, maybe the petitioner, the lawyer, whoever is at that moment inputting data. You feed that data into Visa Law. It using some of that data, it drafts petitions, it drafts letters, etc., and then that gets pulled back into eimmigration to complete, or help complete cases. Is that kind of a summary of what you've just described?
You got it.
Yeah.
You can market it for us if you'd like.
Do people have to go? And I'm digging into this a little bit, but for folks who are listening, they might be interested. If I'm using eimmigration and I want to take advantage of this integration, do I have to leave the eimmigration platform, or is it sort of through an API, through like an iframe, or I don't know, whatever? It's you're in eimmigration and sort of Visa Law does stuff on the back end, or do I need to have kind of both? And there's no good or bad answer. Just curious as to the workflow a little bit.
So I believe at this point, you need to have, they don't call it a case in their system. They have an analog to what we call a case in their system. I don't remember perfectly the label of it, if it was matter or something else, but I believe you need to start by creating that case or matter. But after that, I believe you can do nearly everything else from our system as it pertains to preparing the draft. Right. So you link our case to their matter, and you give it within our platform. It basically asks for the inputs that within their platform would ask for the same thing. We mirror that within ours, so you don't need to leave, and it's kind of a seamless experience throughout. But they have additional bells and whistles within their drafting suite, which you may want to go to their platform for. But for the actual production of the draft, I think about 90% of that process is doable from within our system.
Yeah, and by the way, I put you on the spot there, so I recognize that, but that's that's okay. That's great.
Here's where I don't know. So we are continuing to enhance it as you go. So I don't know exactly where it's at right now, but I believe that's the current state.
Yeah, that's fair. And look, I mean, we have some integrations as well. Typically, that's how it is. Most of it gets done typically in the platform, but sometimes you have to go to the other one because they have some features that can't integrate or just work better on their end. But that's really cool. I mean, I know there was a big kind of PR push, and you guys publicized this partnership. So I think it's really, really exciting. So we talked a little bit about AI. We talked about partnerships. I mean, the Cerenade as a company and then eimmigration as the product has gone through this beautiful rebrand. I've been going to AILA conferences as a tech founder since, 2018, 2019. Eimmigration's always been there. Our banner looks the same. Your guys' banners and marketing stuff has changed. It's so what can we look forward to? I mean, Joel, you're coming in with vision and with go-to-market, market chops, and thinking about sales, and just thinking about things in addition to how they've always been thought about, which was product-led. What can folks expect, from e-immigration in the coming years that you can share? Maybe it's practical or specific, maybe it's just kind of vision-wise, but what are you guys excited about?
Yeah, I mean, again, I think we could split that into the go-to-market and the product. Maybe I can speak a little bit about the go-to-market, but
Yeah.
we'll leave the majority of it for Phillip and the product. So on the go-to-market front, I mean, the different functions within go-to-market span marketing, sales, and biz dev and partnerships. So maybe I can talk about each of those quickly, where on the marketing end, in addition to kind of refining our paid digital and ads, like I talked about earlier, we only made our first full-time marketing hire, who wasn't, a salesperson who was kind of doing marketing on the side, an actual marketing hire after 30 years of operating last year. And
Amazing.
she's amazing. Her forte with us is product marketing and communications, and what that means is, or what that often means for us is communicating about our functionality in a way that is in line with the vocabulary and terminology that immigration professionals use, right? And making sure that our description of our technology mirrors your understanding of the world. Where again, we can have the greatest product in the world and it can sell itself and there could be lots of referrals, but if we don't, in other words, our users could really love our technology and understand the value, but prospects who aren't necessarily speaking to colleagues about it, we need to make sure that it's very clear to them the value that we offer and how that fits in within their world. And that product marketing and communications dimension is really exciting for us to continue growing through. But beyond that, there's stuff on demand generation. Our previous classifying of organizations was you're either a prospect or you're a customer. And I apologize for the sirens in the background, New York City.
New York City.
Yep. But now we're getting a little more refined with that, with life cycle marketing, for instance, where a prospect isn't just a prospect. There's a difference between a brand new, known lead and a marketing qualified lead and an opportunity and everything in between. So bringing some rigor and detail to that allows us to ultimately better tailor our communications to that prospect and hopefully offer them something more of value. If they're not ready to buy a case management system, we might give them information on the immigration space and resources on what a case management system offers that doesn't have anything to do with our solution. But if someone's further down the funnel, obviously we'll tailor information accordingly. So that's on the marketing front. On the sales front, really quickly, I do want to give a shout out to our sales and support and success team. First of all, they're loved, and that's not just me saying it. We've won best support on G2 for multiple years straight. So the opportunity there wasn't necessarily from a personnel perspective, but from a technology perspective. We had a kind of homegrown, again, given this whole tech-led, tech founder culture, we built our own internal CRM that was good, but I think it became fairly obvious to me that a modern CRM, we use HubSpot, could much more adequately support not just our new marketing team members, but our sales and support team, and to just give them some more data to approach their engagements with. And that kind of data-driven mentality, we're hoping that it spreads throughout the organization, including with success and support, where if someone's having an issue in product, we want to get to a tighter place where before they communicate it to us, we already know and we're already addressing it either, reaching out to them or putting out some sort of message. So that's the kind of exciting stuff with support and sales and success. And then that last dimension of biz dev and partnerships, I don't need to talk about too much because I kind of mentioned how ecosystem is increasingly important to us from an integrations perspective, but that's also from the perspective of relationships with people who are immigration voices like yourself. We want to continue staying tuned in on trends in the market and understanding, how things are evolving for our customers. We also just love meeting people in this industry. It makes it more dynamic and exciting. But yeah, that notion of ecosystem, whether it's integrations like Visa Law, and we put out a HubSpot integration last week and a WhatsApp integration the week before that, but also kind of the relationships we're building with other voices in the space. It's an increasingly important priority for us, and it's really exciting. So that kind of helps us move towards product, which I'll let Phillip speak to.
And before Phillip, before you jump in, I just want to note, a couple of things there. If anyone who's listening is, especially if you're early stage entrepreneur or maybe a lawyer thinking about building something, I think one of the cool things you mentioned, Joel, and I could see your business, your MBA mind, I could see it permeating throughout sort of what you're sharing, is actually very simply knowing the vocabulary and knowing what you should even look for as a quote unquote KPI or even as just something, an aspect to look at your business in order to make it better, right? So if you don't know to think about, something like a net promoter score, if you don't know to think about sending client surveys, if you don't know to look at because you were talking about your internal CRM, right? How do your employees manage and look at and think about your clients or prospects? You don't just look at them as they haven't bought yet or they've bought yet. There's a broader range of like where they can be in their, let's call it their sales journey. If you start to learn about that as an early stage entrepreneur, and again, I'm talking to somebody who's either a lawyer who says, I want to build this thing, and they have a great idea, or maybe a technology person who says, I want to build something. They may not have that expertise. And so I think it's really important to learn about those things, especially in the early stages, so that you build those good practices as you're starting a company. Because you're coming in, 30 years into it, right? And it's amazing to think that, eimmigration and Cerenade in general has done so well and has continued to be a leader without, from what I'm hearing, without somebody kind of dedicated to this business side, right? And so I can imagine the thing is like, okay, if we're just going to put fuel on the fire, right? And this is the kind of fuel. So I wanted to mention that as like the takeaway for people who are listening.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, you have to have an excellent product.
Sure.
That has to come first, and that's why this business has done well. But yeah, those two pillars, they definitely want to be in mind.
And I would argue that lawyers building their law practice should be thinking about the same thing too.
Definitely.
What is your net promoter score? Oftentimes we sell software, to immigration lawyers, not just to give them greater efficiency or whatnot, but also to, have them look good for their client. If their clients are getting access to a really nice, easy to use, efficient, compliant platform, the attorney looks really good. And that's something that people refer attorneys based on. Look, my attorney's amazing. They have all these tools and everything's so quick and easy. I'm going to refer my attorney. Whereas another attorney could do great work, but if they're, asking for everything via email, or they're hard to reach because they don't have, some sort of a digital method of communication or whatever, that also impacts the service delivery. So something for lawyers to think about too. So I appreciate the mini business lesson there, Joel.
Definitely. And by the way, we've heard attorneys enjoy using HubSpot as well. We thought it was mostly software companies, but that's why we ended up building that integration. Yeah, I think that there are definitely some parallels there.
So Philip, I want to turn to you, for a minute, and we're kind of wrapping up soon, but I like to look at the future, the vision of the business. So I don't know, from your perspective, what do you think you can share about maybe product wise? And you don't have to be super specific. We're adding this feature, that feature, unless you want to. But maybe in general, with the increase of AI use. I mean, you guys have an integration with VisaLaw.ai, but still the increased use of AI, maybe. Different visa types growing in popularity versus others in the past, where maybe now there's more of a requirement to automate around them. Like, what are some of your thoughts, I guess, from the vision or future of the product within immigration?
Generally, to maintain a competitive advantage, traditionally we don't share about our future roadmap in public forums,
Sure.
but I think pretty much any of our competitors, including us, I think the future is going to be very AI focused. So that is not going to be a secret to anybody. I would want to actually talk about probably one of the cool things that we just introduced at this AILA National, which is we're gonna build on top of, which is we have created a mechanism by which we're presenting the USCIS or any of the immigration related forms, the forms themselves in multiple languages. So you can see an N400 in Japanese or Spanish or Farsi or Arabic, so on and so forth. And what is the value in that? Multifold. One is, first of all, whenever you have a package ready and you want to run it by your foreign national, if they're not fluent in English, the best way of doing it is to show the package, which is mostly forms, in their language. And on the other end of the spectrum, where you're collecting the information, yes, you have your intakes and questionnaires in multiple languages, but what if you can also present the form itself as a mechanism for collection of data? And not only that, obviously, if you're presenting the questionnaire or form in the language of your foreign national, they're going to respond in their language potentially rather than English. And of course, that's not going to be suitable for submitting to ESCS. So the technology has to be able to translate from all these languages back to English, which is again part of this offering that we showcased at AILA. So I think one of the really, really, really cool things that also it's a distinguished factor for us.
That's so cool. And that is not just forms, it's also communication within the platform.
Yes.
So you basically break down the language barrier with the software, and yeah.
Yes, and of course, now we're dealing with a large language model and AI, right? So what a better application of AI to the field of immigration.
Yeah. And it's a really good point, because a lot of times, but whether corporate clients, but more often individual clients, they do choose lawyers based on language capabilities, which, can still be useful. But I guess the idea here is, look, if you're an attorney and you don't speak 7 languages, you only speak English, maybe English and Spanish or something, you can now more comfortably or more confidently service clients that speak a language that you don't know, and you don't have a team member who does, through using the software.
Yes.
Very cool. That's very cool. And you guys, so you just released that in Denver in the AILA annual conference.
Yes.
Amazing. Well, I'm not the first one but maybe I'm the first show that you're on that's talking about it. So that's great. I love it. So, as we wrap up, I like to ask this question, and I love that there's 2 of you, because I think I'll hopefully get 2 different answers. A lot of times when people talk to founders or anybody on a show, they ask them for, what advice would you give yourself when you were just starting, or what advice would you give another person who's just starting? I actually like to change that question around a little bit, and I like to ask, and I'm really curious, with both of you, and especially, I want to start with you, Philip. the opposite. So you've been doing this for 30 years, very successful. You've built this thing from the ground up. You've watched it transform, but there's still so much more to do. So my question to you is, what advice is relevant to you right now? Like, what advice are you listening to, or are you thinking about for yourself that's helping you continue to move forward, at this stage of the business and at this stage of the product?
I think a general thing that applies to any field: be passionate about whatever you choose to do, and if you're passionate, if you really like what you do, everything else is going to come naturally.
And that passion hasn't subsided for you after decades
No,
of
it's
doing
fun.
business.
I enjoy going to work.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's great. And you're right. That's the passion can get you started, and the passion will keep you going. Joel, what about you? What do you think?
Building on that, I think what's become very evident with my first few years here is that greatness is built upon the agency of others. And I think that we didn't get to talk too much about our team today. I know we gave them little shout outs here and there, but there's a really excellent culture that Phillip's helped or kind of led in building here. And you get the sense that people are very much at ease. They're not worried that they're underperforming or this or that, but there's really a intrinsic motivation to do great and build great things and offer a great service to our customers, and that in turn comes back and helps us win more prospects and retain more customers. So I think it's something that's so important that I imagine was top of mind early on when Phillip started building this business, and very much has blossomed into a really beautiful culture today that I think is a key reason for our success ongoing.
By the way, I was checking out the company website the other day, as I was doing some research for the show, and I really like the about section. There's like a history of the company and sort of the story behind it. So I think it's really cool to celebrate that, because we want to, I'm more willing to go into a shop on a regular basis in my neighborhood if I know the owner and I know it's a small business and whatever, and I hear their story and I feel like closer to them. I actually think this is why I love doing the show, and this is why I love diving into the background. I'm also more willing to buy software for that very same reason. If there's an app, if they're competing apps and I like one of them because I heard about the founder or team or whatnot and I connected with them somehow, I'm much more likely to work with them than somebody who's, maybe who I didn't have that experience with. So I think it's really important to think about the team and the culture and how that impacts the business. I love that. Well, guys, thank you so much. This has been a really awesome. I mean, there's so much to learn, and it's exciting to continue to see the business grow, because again, you've been doing it for so long, and this conversation makes me feel like you're a startup and you're just getting started, right? Which is really cool. So I really appreciate you both. I thank you for sharing your stories and where the business is going. For folks who want to maybe look into the platform, if they're in the market right now, or maybe they just want to learn more in case they're ever in the market in the future, they should go to eimmigration.com, and that'll direct them to learn more about the product, set up a demo, etc. Right?
Yep. Thank you for having us on. This was great. This is a good time.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you guys so much. I appreciate it, Joel and Phillip. Thank you again as well for coming on. I'll see you guys at the next ALE conference.
Thank you. I really enjoyed this one.
Thanks again.
Amazing. What a great conversation. So much to learn. So much to take away. I feel like I've been running my business for 8 years, and to see a business again that's been running for many decades and still pushing forward, and is looking at itself as a startup, or is inspiring. So hopefully this is inspiring to folks who are listening and watching as well. I just want to give a quick thanks again to the main sponsor of the show, DocketWise, which is an all-in-one immigration case management platform that provides immigration forms, customizable questionnaires, tons of integrations, including, again, with Laborless, my company, right here. Great customer service. They provide a lot of value to the industry through other things such as blogs and ebooks and podcasts and materials like that. So, if you are not using DocketWise and you want to check them out as well, do visit their website, www.docketwise.com, or check out the link in the show notes. Thank everybody for being here, for watching, for listening. If you have any comments, after the show or during, please leave them wherever you're watching or listening. I always love to hear people's thoughts on the guests, on the stories that are told, etc. Next week, there will not be a show if you're watching this live. It's my birthday, so I'm taking the week off, but we'll be back the week after with the next show. In the meantime, have a wonderful weekend, everybody. Stay safe and peace out.